Good morning and happy Sabbath. If you are connecting and watching this online, it means that today is going to look a little bit different. Most of our teams are focused on huddling up and building relationships, strengthening our internal community connections on site in small groups. For those of you who are connecting from home or on the road, you could still experience some of this if you'd like to join an online prayer group. Kemi will be hosting that live for you. She'll take your prayer requests. You can private message them if you don't want to share them aloud in a group. You can join in the prayer or you can be prayed over. Also, Pastor Colin is going to be launching a Zoom connection group called Rubber Meets the Road, and this is where you can, ask your Bible questions, ask your life application questions, ask your tough theology questions. What are you wrestling with right now? What are the challenges of applying your faith in the 21st century? Pastor Colin would be happy to chat about that with you and whoever arrives in that group. We're going to give you about 5 minutes to look in the video description here for those Zoom links. However, we know that some people are just not into bringing themselves fully to the table just yet. We are happy to replay a previous message from OAC. We'll give you a song to lead in, a message and a song to lead out. And we just thank you again for connecting with us online, for being part of our church community in whatever way you can, and for just taking this time, responding to God's invitation to unite our hearts in worship of our Creator and our King today. We hope you have a blessed Sabbath, and we hope to see you again soon. Good morning and happy Sabbath. If you are connecting and watching this online, it means that today is going to look a little bit different. Most of our teams are focused on huddling up and building relationships, strengthening our internal community connections on site in small groups. For those of you who are connecting from home or on the road, you could still experience some of this if you'd like to join an online prayer group. Kemi will be hosting that live for you. She'll take your prayer requests. You can private message them if you don't want to share them aloud in a group. You can join in the prayer or you can be prayed over. Also, Pastor Colin is going to be launching a Zoom connection group called Rubber Meets the Road, and this is where you can, ask your Bible questions, ask your life application questions, ask your tough theology questions. What are you wrestling with right now? What are the challenges of applying your faith in the 21st century? Pastor Colin would be happy to chat about that with you and whoever arrives in that group. We're going to give you about 5 minutes to look in the video description here for those Zoom links. However, we know that some people are just not into bringing themselves fully to the table just yet. We are happy to replay a previous message from OAC. We'll give you a song to lead in, a message and a song to lead out. And we just thank you again for connecting with us online, for being part of our church community in whatever way you can, and for just taking this time, responding to God's invitation to unite our hearts in worship of our Creator and our King today. We hope you have a blessed Sabbath, and we hope to see you again soon.
kids' church because it teaches you about God.
Because it always got Bible stories.
Yes.
I like kids' church because we watch Freddy too. I like kids because in kids' church we learn about God and we also do lots of different crafts. In kids' church we play games.
Hello, my name's Leanne Ho. I'm the leader of children's ministry here at OAC. I prepare kids' church twice a month for the kids to come and attend. I am an elementary school teacher. I trained in Australia because that is where I'm from. I currently am a grade 2 teacher and a vice principal. Yeah, I have a love of children. Kids ministry to me is helping the kids to develop a closer relationship with God in a fun, caring and hands-on way where they can do creative activities and have lessons that are planned for them to be engaged and learning more about God and developing relationships with Him and with others around them. We usually have a connection time at the beginning, then we go into like a little Bible lesson or story. Then we'll do an activity or a craft, and then we'll end with a prayer at the end. We also begin with a prayer as well. I'll often ask them how their week's been, so we have like a little talking time, sharing time, and it's a lot of like asking them to think about certain things, like how do you think this person felt during that situation, or how would you feel if you were that person, to try and get them to think about if they were in that situation, what would they do or how would they feel. Here in the kids ministry, we actually would like some more volunteers who want to come and get hands-on with our kids, come and be a part of their journey with God. So if you feel the need that you would like to come and be a part of it and participate in it and get to have lots of fun on a Sabbath with children, to play games, to explore, to learn more about God and be a part in their life, please come and see me or drop an email so that we can get in contact with you, or just come see me on the day when Kids Church is on and say, hey Leanne, my name's Joe and I want to help you at Kids Church, because I'll be so happy to talk to you. So come on down and come see me. Don't be afraid. I don't bite on Saturdays, only Mondays, so just see me on a Saturday.
I keep fighting voices in my mind that say I'm not enough. Every single lie that tells me I will never measure up. Am I more than just a sum of every high and every low? Remind me once again just who I am, because I need to know. Ooh, you say I am loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I am strong when I think I am weak. You say I am held when I am falling short, and when I don't belong, oh, you say I am yours. taking all I have, and now I'm laying it at your feet. You have every failure, God. You have every victory. Ooh, oh, you say I am loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I am strong when I think I am weak. You say I am held when I am falling short, and when I don't belong. Oh, you say I am yours, and I believe. Oh, I believe what you say of me. I believe. Oh, I believe. Yes, I believe what you say of me. I believe.
Seven months ago today, on July 1st, my husband and I moved to Vancouver. And we knew a little bit about what to expect. We knew that it was going to be beautiful. Vancouver is famous for being situated between the mountains and the oceans, and we have all these beautiful green spaces around us. We knew that Vancouver is famous for the rain. We knew to expect that there would be plenty of rain, and that we would probably not be able to go a day without being in conversation with someone about Vancouver traffic. We knew that this is the Hollywood North, that there are all kinds of films and TV shows that are filmed and produced here. And we knew it was the home of the Canucks, the Vancouver Canucks. But what no one talks about, and probably what no one else other than nerds like myself who got graduate degrees in educational psychology think about, is that it is also the home of a local psychologist who focuses on developmental and clinical psychology. He's one of the most foremost researchers on attachment theory, and that is Dr. Gordon Neufeld, is a local to Vancouver. And I think we should add this to the cool things we say about Vancouver, because this guy is truly world-renowned. And I was able to attend a seminar this past fall of his where he was presenting on the topic of bullying. And it really changed the way that I think about this topic. And so I'm going to be referencing a lot of his work today as we dive into the first part of this series on relationships. And before those of you who don't have children start to tune out a little bit, I want to stop you and say, please don't hang in there with us, because the truth of the matter is that bullies grow up. They're in your workplace. They're in the grocery line in front of you. They're in our government. They're in our church settings. They are probably going to show up at the next holiday family gathering that you have. It's harsh, but it's true. Bullies grow up. And the fact of the matter is, there has always been those who prey on the weak and the vulnerable. And in this day and age, bullying has become a mainstream dynamic. And so Dr. Neufeld says that there are 4 prevailing expectations for bullying. These are kind of the 4 general ideas that people have when they think about bullying and why kids, adults, why individuals become bullies. And the first one is that it's a power imbalance problem. That the idea that at its root, bullying is a power difference between two people, and if we could just even the playing field, get rid of that power differential, then the bullying behavior would just go away. The second is a very common one, and that is that it's a behavior or a learning problem of some kind. Oh, they just never learned how to behave. Or they just act out because they're weak students. We interpret everything as a behavioral issue, not an emotional issue. Well, let me tell you that as a teacher and now as a principal, I am firmly convinced that there is not a single behavioral trouble that doesn't have emotional roots. And so does Dr. Neufeld, and he's the expert. The third thing that people often talk about is that it's just a human values problem. Some people really believe if we could just instill better values in an individual, that would just fix the issue. That values are supposed to temper our impulses. And the last one is the one that we probably hear the most often, and that is that bullying is really about social skills, or it's really an empathy problem. All children would be nice if they just knew how. But actually, bullies don't really have an empathy problem at all. If empathy can be described as recognizing the vulnerability in another human, bullies are actually empathy professionals. The problem is that coupled with a lack of caring, a bully manipulates that vulnerability. Bullies don't feel conflicted. The worst thing that you can do is tell someone with a mean streak how you're feeling and how the things that they're saying and doing hurt you. The last thing that a bully needs is to know how they are making the bully feel. A bully will exploit that vulnerability and use it to inflict damage. There's been some studies gathered by the National Association of School Psychologists in the States, and they report that nearly 20% of children in grades 6 to 10 have either been bullied, or a similar number admit that they have been engaging in bullying behaviors, taking part in bullying. And in fact, other studies that I found put that number at actually closer to 50%. And when we think about the bullying programs that we have in our schools, we see curriculum that is operating under the assumption that caring exists. And the thing about that is that you can't tutor caring, right? There's no flashcards for it, but we are all capable of it. And so Dr. Neufeld says that there is what he calls the bullying equation. And this is how it goes. The making of a bully, according to him, is that if an individual is highly moved to displace, which means that they have a need to be on top, to be first, if they're highly moved to displace, and we add a lack of feelings of caring, responsibility, that equals the need to assert dominance by exploiting vulnerability. That's the bully response. And this is how it works. Our bodies are made to bounce between stress and resilience. We experience something stressful, our body initiates a stress response, and that inhibits our feelings, anything that might interfere with performing or functioning in those stressful circumstances. And we see this sometimes in survivors of trauma or those that have PTSD. The brain basically says, we can't afford to feel, right? What is supposed to happen, though, is that after the initial stress response, our stress starts to diminish over time, and our feelings are able to bounce back. This is called the resilience response. But if conditions are not conducive for feelings to bounce back, that stress response actually gets stuck, and the feelings that have been inhibited aren't able to bounce back. And stress with the absence of feeling spells trouble. Think about what most of us do when we get stressed. Maybe we get home, or we're even on our commute on the way home, and we call a friend or a family member, and we say, "You will never believe the day that I had.
First of all, he said this, and then that happened, and then that meeting, and then my computer glitched, and oh, you just can't believe everything that went on today. But at the end of the day, you're able to bounce back. But some people are losing their feelings because there is no end of day for them to get their feelings back and allow that stress to diminish. And when a kid or even an adult, someone loses their ability to feel, they lose their empathy. You can have emotions and not necessarily feel them. There's a legend around the samurai warriors of Japan that in addition to the characteristics of discipline and loyalty and the ability to wield two swords at once, that if they could not feel sadness at loss, then they could not become samurai. These fierce fighters had to be in their feels, and they couldn't cut themselves off from their feelings. So bullying at its core is really an emotional problem, characterized by being stuck in that stress mode where our feelings are defensively inhibited, where they're defended against feeling. And the Bible doesn't address bullying specifically. You won't find anywhere in the book of Genesis a line that said, and Joseph's brothers bullieth him, right? That doesn't mean, though, that we can't use biblical principles when we talk about this issue, or that there isn't example after example over and over again in the stories of the scriptures. But first, let's go back to the part of the bullying equation, the first part, that bullies are moved to displace. There's a couple of common displacement instincts, and we see them all around us, right? To take charge, to take over, to take the lead, to talk louder, talk over, talk for another, to be first, to be the best, to be on top, to demand deference, to give orders, to take command. And sometimes we call these instincts leadership. And that is a whole topic for another sermon. But the problem becomes when these traits marry a lack of feeling. When you look at bullies and their childhood, it was not safe for them to depend. And the sons of Jacob are actually a perfect example of this. We find this Bible story in Genesis 37. We have Jacob, a man with 2 wives, really 4, and he has 12 sons. And the second youngest is named Joseph, and he is clearly Jacob's favorite, born of the favorite wife. And the older brothers, the 10 older brothers, resent him for this favoritism. They see it, and they resent it. And Joseph, in addition to being the favorite, he's a little bit of a dreamer. And so he will have a dream and run quickly to tell his brothers and his family, I had a dream, and there was these grain sheaves, and they were all bowing to one. Or I had a dream, and the sun and the moon and the stars were bowing to me. So this didn't win him any favors with these brothers who were already resentful. It probably wasn't even very popular with Dad. What? The sun, the moon bowing to you? What? But he continued, obviously, to share these things with his family. And so at one point in the story, Jacob, the father, sends the 10 older brothers to Shechem with their herds of sheep. And after a while, hadn't heard anything, and so decided to send Joseph to check on them. And they see him coming from a long way off, and the grumbling starts, and someone gets this crazy idea. Why don't we grab him and throw him in a pit? And this was intending to let him die, right? This is a plot, basically, to kill their younger brother. So they throw him in a pit, intending to let him die, but they see later a group of Midianite merchants headed to Egypt. And so they decide to sell him as a slave. So their position as beloved sons was highly dependent on who their mother was and whether she happened to be pregnant at the time. They could not depend on their father's love or their mother's happiness or their place in the family. And when their baby brother, Joseph, threatened the little sense of order or place that they had, when there was even a sense that somehow he might end up on top, maybe even taking command of them, they threw him in a pit and sold him into slavery. You see, they were defending against depending. They had lost all feeling of caring and responsibility for their family. It was the perfect bullying equation. But here's the thing, bullying is not in the genes. Although some could argue that their grandpa Laban, even their dad, did have some bullying tendencies. But if a bully can be made, given the right conditions, they can be unmade. If at least one of the two variables in this equation can be removed, we no longer have a bullying response. We don't actually know all that went on with Joseph's brothers after he left for Egypt. We have snippets of their stories, and we can kind of piece together a picture of their lives post-selling their brother into slavery. Take Judah, for example, son number 4. Just after this whole sell your brother into slavery and break the heart of your aging father deal, the Bible tells us in Genesis 38 that Judah gets married and he has 3 sons. And he clearly loves them very much. And in fact, we can tell from the story that he's quite protective of them. This is good for Judah because we have some feelings happening here. Feelings of tenderness, caring, a sense of responsibility for his family. His 2 older sons and his wife die, and he is immersed in grief. The Bible actually uses this word grief specifically. This is also good. I mean, not obviously that his family is dying, that's not the good part, but he can feel sadness at the loss of his family. In the midst of that grief, though, he makes some pretty poor decisions. He gets himself into a situation where he has to depend on someone else, his daughter-in-law. And he has to depend on her, really, to make a very tricky situation right. A situation that probably caused him to feel a lot of feelings, maybe of guilt, of embarrassment, shame even. Here, we've got a bully being unmade, feeling his feelings and having to depend on someone else. In fact, later in the story, spoiler alert if you haven't read it, he puts his life on the line for his other half-brother that was birthed by his Aunt Rachel, Joseph's brother Benjamin. And I think that his turnaround happened because he was no longer able to defend against depending and feeling. We know the bullies from the beginning of time practically have been with us. But if you can feel, you can avoid that bully response. So the 2 main interventions for bullying are make it safe to depend and make it safe to feel. In essence, we have to create the same environmental conditions that God provides for us, that God offers to us. Think about the relationship between God and man that we probably have the most detailed written record about. The writings of David, who is a man after God's own heart. The most famous biblical passage that David authored, perhaps, is Psalm 23. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. It's difficult for us to know exactly what was happening during the writing of the 23rd Psalm. There are those that will tell you that this psalm was written while David was a youth tending sheep because it's very much a shepherd's psalm. However, there are some scholars that think that this was not the case. For example, in verse 5, he was old enough to have enemies. And it sounds like more than just the lion or the bear coming after the sheep. In verse 4, he was facing the danger of death. In verse 3, he was experiencing rest. And again in verse 5, he was experiencing prosperity. These things all point to someone who has probably reached maturity, reached adulthood. And it is possible that the 23rd Psalm was written while David's army was in the midst of a civil war against the army of his son, Absalom. Now, of course, obviously, David is grief-stricken and he is heartbroken. And it was probably the darkest hour of his life when he wrote the words, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Psalm 23 is the ultimate picture of healthy dependence and attachment. Was David safe? No, he wasn't. But he felt safe because he knew that he could trust and depend on God. And clearly, we know that he felt some things, right? Psalm seems like an emotional roller coaster of David's highs and lows. Certainly, he had a place to feel his feelings at the end of the day. He felt that he could go to God and express the things that he was feeling. We all need a time and a place for our feelings to catch up. By the way, do you want to know one of the best ways to feel? Music. Yeah. We know, obviously, that David had this idea because he was a prolific songwriter and musician. And it's no coincidence, I think, here that we worship with music, that we are provided with a place to feel. Schools with choirs have the best level of mental health because students have a venue to feel and to express emotion through music. So if we go back to the 4 prevailing explanations for bullying, we can see that it all comes down to a matter of feeling. The problem is not developing social skills in your neighborhood bully. Behavior and apparent moral problems are fueled by underlying emotional problems. And a power imbalance, hierarchy is the answer, not the problem. Bullies need someone in authority that they can depend upon. So what it comes down to is this: right relationships and soft hearts. Bullies need to be in trusting, dependent relationships and have the ability to feel their emotions. If we can't help to create these variables in the lives of the children and even the adults around us, there is no hope for the bully. It's not about having the answer, it's actually about being the answer. And this means a lot of listening. This means providing a place for others to feel their feelings, to bounce back from the stress response. This means developing relationships with kids and teens in this church. The number one contributing factor to positive mental health in teens is a positive attachment to an adult who feels responsible for them. Bullying is virtually non-existent in communities and cultures where there is a cascading chain of care, meaning that older are taking care of younger, and those younger are taking care of those even younger than them. We are built, God has designed us as creatures of togetherness. We know that even looking in the model of the Trinity, right? We are made for community. And we need to bring back the dignity in dependence. We live in a world that tells you that you can do everything by yourself, that you don't need anyone else. But we need to bring back that culture of dependence and care for one another. We need each other. So now you kind of know how to fight right when it comes to bullies. So the question is, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to contribute to the unmaking or even prevent the making of a bully? The last time we hear from Judah in the Bible, his father blessed him and his brothers, and his brother Joseph, the one that he wronged in such a big and life-altering way, had forgiven him. And we know that later, through his line of descendants, would come Jesus Christ, the Lion of Judah. And you know, I have to say that that is a pretty big turnaround for someone who was just someone's bully of a brother.
When the shadows all around me, when the hardest battle's coming at me, rushing in like a flood, when my heart is at its farthest, in the hardest moments I've imagined, still I know who you are. You are the God of the valleys, you're the God in the storm, and through every battle, yes, I know who you are. You're my anchor of hope in the rage of the seas. You are the God who fights for me. In the shadow of your presence, I can feel your power working in this. You still my fears with your peace. It's your glory in my story, and I know your love is working for me. Lord, I know that you are good. You are the God of the valleys, you're the God in the storm, and through every battle, yes, I know who you are. You're my anchor of hope in the rage of the seas. You are the God who fights for me. And there's no giant too strong that my God can't slay. There's no mountain too big He won't throw to the waves. There's no weapon that's formed that my God can't break. You are the God who fights for me. You are the God of the valleys, you're the God in the storm, and through every battle, yes, I know who you are. You're my anchor of hope in the rage of the sea.